Good evening, Year 11. This is your night before news video for your maths paper 1, which is tomorrow morning, and this is for the higher tier paper. This video is just going to go through a few possible potential topics that could come up and some final sort of tips and ideas for your last bits of revision this evening. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was what could be in this exam. It is important that you understand that I have not seen this paper, none of the maths teachers have, which is on purpose, that is deliberate, so that we get a fair picture of what you can do and what you can't do as we think about finishing this second mini race and then preparing you for that final third race up to the exams in the summer. So what we can then talk about though, as this is paper 1, which is non-calculator, what are some, extremely likely topics that you could see that tend to lend themselves more to being non-calculator as opposed to calculator? So those are things like your 4 operations, thinking about multiplying, dividing, adding and subtracting. That's going to include decimals. So thinking about, can you multiply decimal numbers together successfully without a calculator? Can you divide decimal numbers successfully without a calculator? This will probably be embedded in other topics, but also it could just be a standalone question, multiply these 2 decimals together. Similarly with fractions then, a type of question that wouldn't make much sense to have in a calculator paper because you could just type it in, so you might be asked to do any of those 4 operations with fractions. You've also got percentages, so yes, we have some pretty strong methods of how we could calculate percentages with a calculator, but how are your non-calculator percentages? Can you answer any question without a calculator on percentages too? Estimation. So can you successfully interpret the question properly, that it is an estimation question? Can then you round sensibly and appropriately and then make your estimation? Index laws and negative or fractional indices. So anything that again would be pretty easy to sort of evaluate on a calculator. Can you remember those index laws? Can you remember what happens if it's a negative or a fractional index number? Anything algebra, that's going to be a core theme across all 3 papers because lots of it can be done without a calculator, or that the fact that you have a calculator wouldn't help you anyway. So forming and solving, which might involve simplifying, expanding, factorising, solving an equation, rearranging. Ratio, again, you'll find that to be a common theme across all 3 papers, I'm sure. It's a huge strand in your maths GCSE, but that was probably highly likely to be seen tomorrow morning. Surds, again, if it's going to come up, it's going to be in paper 1. So can you manipulate surds successfully? Can you evaluate them? Can you simplify them? Can you rationalise? Exact trigonometric values, so the only time that can really come up is in this paper. Can you reproduce that table for exact trig values and therefore answer any trig question without a calculator in paper 1? Functions, again, could well come up in paper 2 or paper 3, but can quite often come up in paper 1 because it's quite easy to make a nice tricky functions question that does not require a calculator. And quadratic inequalities, I feel like we tend to see this one mainly in non-calculator papers, sort of towards the back of the paper, because it might factorise, but it could be this comes up later in paper 2 or 3, and maybe you might need to use a quadratic formula. So also likely, so just some other non-calculator topics that tend to land themselves in paper 1, although you might see them in paper 2 or 3. So I'm thinking about algebraic fractions, simultaneous equations, highest common factor and lowest common multiple. So it's worth mentioning product of prime factors at this point. Angle facts, think about bearings, think about circle theorems, plotting graphs, error intervals, transformations, circles, sectors, volume. If it was circles, sectors and volumes, it would need to be, in terms of pi, or it could be an estimation question. Possible then, you've got probability, Pythagoras, area, it said circle theorems already, functions, statistics, statistical representations, so maybe histograms, cumulative frequency, box plots, and more. The tricky thing about the Maths GCSE is that most of it could come up in any of the papers. The only way we can kind of split it is that like we said on the previous slide, there are some topics that really do only make sense to be in paper 1 if they're going to come up at all. So what can you do this evening? I'm hoping the previous 2 slides maybe gave you some ideas as to what topics you would like to revise tonight, but how can you do this? So you've got Sparks Maths. Remember, obviously, you can go onto the independent learning on Sparks Maths and you can type in any topic and then make sure you're set to GCSE curriculum, and then you can just have a look at the videos on there and some of the different questions. You've also got on Sparks, it's worth mentioning, that new Sparks revision tool, which would be great, and that is organised by strand, so you might find that's a little bit more of mixed revision. If you want to keep down the specific topic route, on top of Sparks Maths, you've got exam queue. So do make sure when you go on exam queue that you're set to higher. I think it's defaulted onto higher, but just double check this. Select paper 1 so that you are only seeing questions that are non-calculator, and then you can type into that topic box a topic that you're looking for, or you can just use it as a drop-down menu and scroll down through it. Each question will come with a mark scheme, so you can mark your answer to check that you have got that correct. And then Maths Genie as well, great for lots of topic-based revision. Just click on the GCSE revision button at the top or on just that main page in the centre there. And Corbett Maths videos and worksheets will take you to a similar list, all alphabetised, split up into topics. You've got videos, practice questions, which are exam style, and you've got answers there. If you scroll down to one of the pink, click here for answers, and you have a list of all of the answers. If you want to do a practice paper, again, Maths Genie is great for this because you can go to Edexcel exam papers and you can look at past exam papers. Tomorrow morning the hub is going to be open from 7, so feel free to come in. I would recommend that if you are coming in that you would bring some questions that you haven't been able to answer if you want to maximise the use of that time, because obviously all the maths teachers are going to be there and we'd love to help you. So try some revision tonight and then bring in some questions for us to look at. If not, you'll have the computers there, so you'll be able to get onto Sparks, get onto exam queue, and we'll try to have some paper resources down there as well for you. We'll move ourselves off into the conservatory / the canteen from about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'll have our revision warm-up grid, which will look familiar from mock 1. So just a selection of some possible non-calculated topics for you to be working through with a copy of the answers, and again also all of the maths teachers dotted around if you needed any help. You will then be having a line-up at 8:50 to get you ready to go off into the arena to start your exam for 9. So final advice from me before I let you go and get on with your revision, make sure when you get into that exam tomorrow that you do try every question. Okay, if you don't try the question, you are just accepting that you will not get any marks on it. Okay, every time you attempt the question, there's that possibility that you're going to be picking up a mark or 2. So just try to ask yourself, how could I get the first mark on this question? And that might actually set you up for the rest of the question as well. Always go back and read the last line before you move on, so you're having that process of, have I actually answered the question? A classic one on the half-term revision was the question about compound interest, and it said how much interest has the person earned, and the common mistake was people were just writing the total in the bank account. So you need to go back and reread that last question, the last one of this question, so that you know that you have actually answered it. Make sure your answers are sensible, so always refer to your answer back into the context. For example, have you just calculated a speed of a car and it's worked out to be like 240 miles an hour? That obviously is not an appropriate answer and you possibly made a mistake. So just check, does your answer make sense in the context of the question that you're trying to answer? And then finally, just make sure that you use all of your time. You do have a bit more than a mark a minute, and you know that actually towards the start of the paper those questions don't take you a mark a minute, so you have got enough time, you've got plenty of time to make sure that you're getting all of what you can out of that paper. So you use every single second of the time available to you. That's it from me then, so good luck with the rest of your revision tonight and we'll see you in the morning.